Good evening and welcome to the Star Chamber Show live podcast. It is a great Wednesday evening here in Lexington, Kentucky, where I, Stephen Zimmer, am broadcasting to you from. And yes, this is episode number 437 for those of you keeping score. And joining me in just a few minutes will be the loquacious, the vivacious, the wonderful Holly Phillippe in the co-hosting chairs. Not on just yet, but she will be joining me in progress on the show. So not too long from now. So yes, I got a few things to go over with you all as far as Imaginarium 2025 updates. And then I have a couple of cool personal updates as well. Hopefully Holly will be on by then because one of them involves Holly. So we'll hopefully she'll be on air by the time that happens. But we will go ahead and get started with bringing you the updates from the past week. It's been, of course, as always, another great week of editions for the Imaginarium convention. And so we have some new spotlighted guests. We've got several new panelists, as a matter of fact. And of course, we also do want to recognize again our latest Imaginarium 2025 individual patron, which we did talk about on last week's show. But of course, we love all of our patrons and sponsors because they definitely help us to bring you more content in the convention. Of course, we announced the great Fabled Forest Books and Gifts as an official sponsor last weekend. A great bookstore right there in Georgetown, Kentucky. Definitely recommend it. I had a wonderful signing there a couple of weeks ago, and they have become since a sponsor of the convention. And then also want to give a big shout out, another thank you to award-winning screenwriter and author Carol Preflattish, who became our latest Imaginarium 2025 individual patron. Really appreciate that. Yeah, she's awesome. Just such a great, talented writer and screenwriter, and just absolutely just on all cylinders lately. Always see a lot of great updates for her on her writing adventures, and got a cool logo. It's actually the logo that's being used for this patron spot. But yeah, check it out. She's got some really cool author logos now as well. As far as the new panelists go, we welcomed aboard award-winning author, editor, and artist Lawrence Weil. He's fantastic, great writer of literary fiction, and definitely a wonderful panelist participant. We also, for the first time to Imaginarium, welcome author Stephanie K. Clemens as an official panelist. And then welcoming back to Imaginarium are two other panelists. And you will know one of them from the show here because she gets mentioned quite a bit. It is Molly Daniels, who also writes under the name Kenzie Michaels. So, yes, she usually logs in under Kenzie on the show. And so you've heard that name mentioned a lot. And she will be coming to Imaginarium, returning to Imaginarium, I should say, as a panelist. And then we also have author Dave Weller. Dave is a fantastic panelist as well, and has a great sports journalism background, and has a lot to offer, panels and workshops and all kinds of stuff with Imaginarium. So, yeah, he is definitely a wonderful addition, and we're looking forward to having him as well. And then we also did announce one spotlighted guest, and that would be award-winning author, podcaster, cosplayer, musician, artist, and magician, John B. Pica. And he was announced, I think it was on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Monday. And John is amazing. Yeah, he has over 300 episodes and counting of his Back of the Cereal Box Pop Culture podcast. Great podcast. I was actually a guest, and Holly was a guest on it once, and it is a really, really good podcast you should check out. And he also is the author of the Decoverse, the Tales of the Decoverse series. And he's also an award-winning magician, extremely talented. He has performed at many Imaginariums, and just amazing entertainer, magician, performer. And he's even written 4 books on magic, including an industry bestseller, Theatrical Magic. Really great guy, really cool guy, and we're looking forward to having him as always back at Imaginarium. And I think Holly might be tuning in. Holly, is that you?
I'm here.
There you are. There you are. It was just yeah, we're just getting underway. The chat room. Yeah, see, I want to give a shout out to the awesome Devin Hilton. Yeah, we got a
Hi,
great topic
Devin.
for you tonight, by the way, Devin. Yeah, coming up with our guest just shortly. I know it's going to be something you're going to find really cool. But yes, Holly, I was just going over the latest Imaginarium updates, giving people a list of some of the latest panelists: Molly Daniels, Dave
And
Willer,
and
Lawrence
and
Weil, and
Stephen.
Stephanie K. Clemens.
Okay.
Yes,
While you are got your computer open, because I just sit down to do this, would you please announce the workshop, the new film workshop, please?
I will. Where is the info on that? I
Info
forgot.
Center, dear.
Okay, okay. I did not know we were going to be announcing that, but I will.
Yes,
I most certainly will.
I did that so we could announce it this week.
Okay, let me find it. I think I can do it. I think I can. We have the power.
My tablet is dead as a doornail.
Oh no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Workshops 2025. Okay, workshops, film workshops. Ah, okay. Are you speaking of the one with Mr. Hilton and Tim Miller?
Yes, yes, I
All
am.
right.
Please talk
Well,
about that one.
well, yeah, he happens to be in the chat room, so he can definitely comment on this. But
Uh-huh.
we are going to do a workshop at Imaginarium called "How to Write and Create an Audio Drama Fictional Podcast." So yes, this is going to be really cool, and got some. Definitely think this is going to be a great addition to Imaginarium, and yeah, it's something that I definitely had got excited about when you told me about it, Holly. And I'll go ahead and just read the official
Yes,
description so everybody knows what it is. An
yes,
in-depth look at the process of producing an audio drama, pre-production, the writing process, the audio process, and how to direct actors in this new and exciting medium. Of course, yeah, Devin, great comic creator, filmmaker, award-winning filmmaker, and also award-winning filmmaker Tim Miller. Yeah, both of them are very experienced, very knowledgeable, and will be both conducting this workshop. It's scheduled to run 60 minutes from what I
yes,
see in the chart
yes.
here. So there you
That's great.
go. Some breaking news.
Yes,
Some I wasn't even aware was official to share yet. So yeah,
yes.
even I got a scoop tonight. So I knew
There you
about the
go.
workshop. I knew kind of what the workshop was that was being developed, but it's nice to see it's in the official place now. It's gone up
It
on the
is.
board, as they say. So,
I have
yeah,
taken care of it. I got a few more that'll be on there for next week, but I've got
awesome.
to noodle through some stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, well, I know you got some amazing workshops coming in. I can't wait till we start to share those because I think a lot of people are going to be pretty pumped about what's coming. And
yes,
but that was it. Yeah, as far as the Imaginarium updates, I think I think I mentioned to you I already announced Lawrence Weil and Stephanie K. Clemens and Molly Daniels and Dave Weller as panelists, John Pica and spotlighted guest, and then gave another thank you to Carol Preef-Ladish for being an individual patron, and Fabled Forest Books and Gifts, of course, for being a new sponsor. But that's I think that about wraps it up. Unless you have anything else, Holly.
that would be it for now.
All right. All right. Sounds good. And next, I did want to comment just a little bit on the little book run of events I've been doing because I want to give a big shout out to From the Ground Up Books and Resources, great bookstore with two locations. There's one in LaGrange, Kentucky, and one in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. So both are very close to Louisville. So if you're in Louisville, you can definitely hit either of these locations pretty easily. Holly and I made a trip up last Saturday to the Shepherdsville location, and Lynn Tincher was our host for the day, and she was awesome. She was absolutely awesome, and I want to give a big shout out to her. We had a great day. A lot of people came by. A lot of books found new homes. Definitely, I got to see some people that listeners to the show will be familiar with, like Dwan Hearn Moon, the one and only. Yeah, he'd stopped by and visited for a good while. I was glad we got to spend a lot of time with him, and also author J. Patrick Lamar also came in to visit with us. Amy McCorkle stopped by, the mighty McCorkle, award-winning screenwriter, author, and filmmaker. And so, yeah, we saw some fellow peers of the creative world, and yeah, met a lot of new readers, and it was good days. I mean, it was really not. The bookstore is just it's cozy, and Holly even got to explore. What was it? A Reiki room. Is that the right term?
Well, what was so neat about that is the lady, I was looking at some of her stuff. I was like, "Oh, I want it all." And I did buy me a some chakra divination um like tool, pendulum. And then what else did I get? I got something else. Oh, I got me some uh altar candles. And I was looking around, and she happened to come in there, Missy did, and she's like, "Well, yeah, I do Reiki. You want to see my room?" And I'm like, "Yes, I want to see your room." And so she took me in there, and immediately I noticed the smell, and I'm like, "What is that?" Well, apparently, you all, Lowe's, for an additional fee, will put different scents into your paint. So she had to wall paint it with a lavender infused scent. So it smelled so lovely in there. And then I noticed that she had something hanging on her wall, and I'm like, I got that exact same thing that holds my pendulums at home. It hangs on my bedroom wall. I said, that's the exact same thing I have. And then I found out her birthday is like the day after mine. Hers is Valentine's Day, mine's the day before. So it was really cool. Two Aquarians, and yeah,
Yeah,
it was pretty neat. But yeah, I
that
would
is
say check
awesome.
it out. Once a month, if you call um, for Ground Up Books there and ask once a month, she does free Reiki um, demonstrations and classes. That's free to the public. So you can go in and enjoy the benefits and learn more about it. And yeah, I thought that was really cool too. So I'm going to try to make it, if at
That's
all
awesome.
possible, this month. Yeah.
Fantastic. And yeah, and that's again from the Ground Up Books, Shepherdsville, Kentucky. And of course, that is also where the Pencrafters Writing Mentorship Program is held with from the Ground Up Books, and also the John B. Tencher and James L. Calvert Independent Literary Foundation is tied in there with them as well. So yeah, great supporters of the writing community. Lynn Tencher, and we got to see Valina, who handles a lot of the events and promotions and all with from the Ground Up Books. We got to meet Valina as well, which was awesome. And yeah, the fun doesn't end there. I'll give one more heads up. If you're in Lexington this Saturday, Holly and I will be together at Kroger Wine and Spirits in Boston Road, doing Books and Bourbon too. And yes, that's a book signing and bourbon tasting. And no, if you don't drink, don't feel obligated. You don't have to be. There's no obligation to have the bourbon tasting, but it's fun. And if you do enjoy that thing, you'll have a blast. But it's held alongside of course, signing with myself, with all the titles present, and for your browsing and Christmas gift buying or whatever you would like to do. But yeah, please do come out and see us. We'll be there from noon till 5, both of us, and I'll be signing books, and I'll have everything available there. And of course, you can also take part in the bourbon tasting. So Books and Bourbon 2 at Kroger Wine and Spirits on Boston Road, Lexington, Saturday, noon to 5. Yes, come out and see us. That's going to be a whole lot of fun. This will be the second one of those that we've done there, and just love it, just love it. So now, yes, before we move on to our guest of the evening, I do want to recognize the two folks that brought you tonight's show, and that's the one and only Ren Garcia, and then also Sandy Lender, the genre blender. So first, we'll give you a spot from Ren, and then we'll move over to show you a little bit from Sandy, and then our guest of the evening will be brought onto the show. So here's a bit from Ren.
The League of Elder dares to be unusual. It's easy to be swept away in this bold and uninhibited landscape where fantastic heroes become old friends and sinister villains inhabit every dark corner. Dare to explore things best left alone. Each book is your lantern, lighting the path to a world never before seen. So what do you say? Are you weird enough for us?
You
Yes,
know we are, sir. You know we are.
we are, Ren. We love you. Thank you very much. Again, it's Ren Garcia, the League of Elders series. And here's a little bit from Sandy Lender with the great book Silver Bells.
What happens if you schedule a Krampus movie on the Hallmark Channel? You get Silver Bells from Sandy Lender. The reviews are coming in for this new holiday horror, and readers are loving the mature female lead and the spooky Christmas setting. BestThrillers.com gave Silver Bells a highly recommended rating, saying, "Through striking visuals, Reindeer Creek reads like a mashup of Washington Irving's haunted forests in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, the greed-induced decay of Pottersville in It's a Wonderful Life, and the glitzy electric spectacle of The Great Christmas Light Fight." Grab your copy of Silver Bells by Sandy Lender today.
Thank you, Sandy. You are awesome. We appreciate your support of the show. Yes, go out and pick up a copy. Tell her you heard about it here, and yeah, hopefully everything's going well for you, Sandy. I know she usually listens in on the show, and so yes, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give the introduction for tonight's guest. Our guest is in the VIP room, as I call it, right now, right now. So
In the
tonight's
house.
guest had a career in the financial industry and also served as board president for two nonprofits. Currently, tonight's guest is a certified hypnotherapist, a Reiki master, and an EFT practitioner. Our guest has a debut novel called Memories of MK Ultra, which is inspired by experiences from his early childhood, where he, along with his brother and sister, underwent experiments of the CIA's MK Ultra mind program. So it is my honor and pleasure to bring onto the Star Chamber show for the very first time, Bill Yarborough. And Bill, hopefully you're on your
Sure
microphone.
am.
Yes, and welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Well, yeah, my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invite.
You got it. Yeah, your topic, when Holly told me that, yeah, she had got in contact with you and had
Yeah,
you scheduled the show, and then told me what the show was going to be about. I was like, oh wow, this is fantastic, because yeah, the whole MK Ultra thing is yeah, very interesting to me and has been for a long
fascinating.
time. And the fact that you wrote it in a novel, your experiences in a novel format, and that you yourself had experiences with this. I mean, I am looking forward to our visit tonight. But how are you doing? And how are you? What's the latest with you?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. The novel is actually available now on Amazon if you want to buy it. It's going to be officially released with all of the promotion as far as our marketing next week. So
Awesome.
yeah. So but I'm excited to do podcasts like this. It's definitely a great way to get it known out there and. Yeah, I've been very excited with the response so far, and I think you did a great job of sort of highlighting my background and then my experience. I might start off by explaining why it's a novel, as opposed to a
Yeah,
memoir. And
yeah,
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, before you get into that even, would you explain exactly what MK Ultra is for our
sure,
listeners? Some people
sure,
may not know what we're
right.
even talking
sure.
Yeah,
about.
Sure, that's a great way to start. So
Okay.
basically, MK Ultra was it started in the early '50s and really ran through 1964. Although in the early '60s it began to wind down. They had about 149 sub projects that were sort of parceled out to 80 institutions. Uh, Primarily in the United States, but also overseas. And they had three main objectives. The CIA did at that time. They really wanted to master mind control. They felt that the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans were into that, and they felt they were falling behind. So that was one objective. They also wanted to perfect their interrogation techniques when they had enemy agents captured. And then they also wanted to make sure they could come up with a way to prevent their America's CIA agents from divulging secrets if they were caught. And there were a lot of other things with it, but they basically used electric. I mean, they used electric shock, psychedelic drugs, hypnosis, psychological assault, isolation, and other forms of abuse. And it experimented on basically American and foreign citizens, hospital patients, prisoners, college and university students, adults, and children.
hmm
And
yeah,
and how did exactly my question is before you go into the book is how in the world did you get involved in this as children? Because it was you and your siblings, correct?
Correct, correct. So My father was in the war crimes branch after World War II. He was a lawyer, so when the war was over, he signed up to do that, and he was he was stationed in Nuremberg, but also Dachau. And Dachau was where Hitler had one of his big mind control experimental things going on with the concentration camp prisoners. So my father's job was to interview the SS officers and others that were involved with it to find out if there were crimes against humanity. But America actually had an other sort of secret agenda, which was called Operation Paperclip. And you may well have heard of that. If you're into MK Ultra, you likely have, but others may not. And that was basically an effort to go through the ruins of Nazi Germany and find any expertise that could help us win the Cold War. So the most famous person is Werner von Braun. He was Hitler's chief rocket engineer, and he basically became America's chief rocket engineer. And he designed our early rockets all the way up to the Saturn V rocket that got us to the moon. And I don't think this necessarily has anything to do with why I got into MK Ultra, but my mother's godmother was actually his mother. So what we think happened is that our father was somehow got pulled into Operation Paperclip, and probably met some of these people that they moved to the United States. And it didn't matter how many people they had killed; they were given brand new identities,
Mm-hmm.
and was certainly not put on trial. And so we happened to live in Maryland when we were young. And Maryland, at Fort Detrick, Maryland, is where MK Ultra was primarily headquartered, so to speak. So I think those are the two key things that probably got us into it. I do think our parents' minds might have been monkeyed with because I did confront my father over this. My sister and I had these memories, and my brother. And, in his normal voice, he said, I don't know anything about this. But then suddenly
Oh,
his voice changed. He started looking over his shoulders and started whispering in this creepy sounding voice, and then began to defend those people.
oh,
And then he went back to his normal self and said he didn't know anything about it. And then he flipped over again. And it was an extremely eerie experience. I had seen this
wow.
other kind of subpersonality on very rare occasions where he was not at all like his normal self. And so had my sister, but I don't know for sure, but I think he was monkeyed with. But his reaction, pretty much in my mind, confirmed that uh, we were likely involved with it. They destroyed the records. Richard Helms was Nixon's CIA director. When he got wind in 1973 that the New York Times was going to do a big expose on the illegal activities of MK Ultra, and that the Senate, the Church Committee of the Senate, was going to investigate it, he ordered all of the MK Ultra records destroyed. Some survived because they forgot about those that were in the financial division. Uh, so it's so. I think I'll pause there.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
now you can talk about, why you decided to do the novel. Was it to like bring, what was what's your end goal in bringing out the novel? Was it, I have questions like, does it help you with the trauma? Was it therapeutic for you? Or is this to bring into light the capabilities of, these secret government experiments?
Yeah, I think both of those. Actually, my therapist thought that writing it. Well, first of all, because I was only 4 years old, and the memories were repressed for 30 years, and that's 30 years later when we were in our 30s. My brother was in his 20s. We began to remember this stuff, and we were pretty certain, my sister particularly, that we were given psychedelic drugs. We all remembered being given electric shock. We were kept in isolation, actually jail cells. We all three independently remembered that we were kept in jail cells. Um, and so because of those factors, I can't be 100% sure of my memories. They could be distorted. but we did remember a number of things independently, and it fit with once we started finding out about. We remembered this stuff for a number of years before we ever heard of MK Ultra. But then my brother-in-law told me that he heard this radio interview and that everything we were talking about, apparently, this program did. So um, that that's a so that's the factor. One of the factors why I wrote it as a novel. Plus, I can't really know what is in the minds of a lot of people back then. So it would have to be fictionalized because of my young age. But to your point, as far as it was partly a healing journey. My therapist thought that if I wrote it as a novel, that would give me some distance, and I think she was right. It was actually a cathartic thing to do because it allowed me to deal with some of this stuff slowly over time to release, uh, the emotional trauma. Because if you remember this stuff too fast, it can be very bad. And unfortunately, that's what
It's
happened with my brother.
overwhelming.
Huh?
It would be overwhelming.
Right. And unfortunately, that happened to my brother. He had a psychotic break. And at the time,
Oh,
I had no idea what happened, but as this stuff began to emerge, and then I figured it out. Yeah, I could tell by the comments he made. This is what he was talking about, and it made no sense when my memories were blocked, but it did later.
Well, what
wow.
is the as far as the novel goes and your approach to it, what was the genre of it? And then also, if you'd like to describe the process of actually writing it.
Sure. Um, well, what I'm calling it is a coming of age psychological thriller with aspects of a historical novel, because there's certainly a lot of history in it, and the metaphysical. The reason it's the metaphysical is that you probably know that the CIA had a lot of interest in the paranormal,
Hmm.
the psychic spies, the remote viewing,
Hmm.
uh, and actually in some well researched books that I've read that are on my website that I recommend. Uh, the guy who ran it, Sidney Gottlieb, really believed that there were forces in the universe unknown to science, and he wanted to connect with those forces. So there is that element there too. Um, I when I set out to write the novel, one of my big goals was if you have blocked out memories for 30 years and then suddenly they begin to come back, you begin to understand why you might have been twisted personality wise, and that there were these things buried in my subconscious or actually unconscious that were driving my behavior. And I thought I knew why I was interested in certain things or did certain things, but I didn't know because it went back to these experiences. And even if you uh, haven't blocked out memories, a lot of people have had trauma, but they've never really dealt with it emotionally. So that will still drive behavior. So I have two storylines. One of them is about three siblings starting off when they're put into the MK Ultra program, and then it traces their life all the way through their childhood into their adulthood. But intermixed is another storyline done from the point of view of the man who ran the program they were in, uh, and the reader gets to see the things that are done to them. So the reader begins to connect this stuff, and based on the folks that I've had read it, that's one feature that a lot of them like. It does kind of open their mind to, oh, okay, this is how unconscious forces work. Now, not everybody has something like I got, but a lot of us has had difficult experiences and things like that, and we may not quite realize how much that influences our behavior. So, and a lot of it was to talk about the healing journey. You can overcome these kind of things. And in the first book, it ends in the late '80s. The healing was predominantly psychotherapy or talk therapy. So that's what goes on in this book, and it was very helpful. But there's going to be a sequel, and other therapeutic techniques will be introduced, such as your the guest on your program who was talking about Reiki earlier. I'm a Reiki. My wife and I are Reiki
Yes, yes.
masters, and that can be very, those kind of energetic techniques have been very helpful on my recovering journey. So, but the talk therapy was very helpful too.
Yeah, well, I find it very fascinating as far as like when you mentioned also that there's a metaphysical aspect and in the program to even with remote viewing and then and other dimensional
Oh,
beings and dimensions even because you even see that with the Hadron Collider. You can even if you dig deep enough into some of the stuff
Right,
revolving around the Hadron Collider and over there at CERN, and it is. Yeah, some fascinating stuff.
right.
And along the way, I mean, you have personal experience, obviously, from your childhood, and then you, of course, are well researched, and you mentioned, you have books that you recommend on your website. But along this journey too, I was always also wondering, did you also start connecting with others that were had similar experiences as you, and did you connect to some communities of other people that have been through what you and your siblings had?
Yes, I had. There's several people that I've met and there's really two groups of those. One group is the ones that, based on their age and the things that they said, it felt very much like it was the same program I was involved with. They experimented a lot in mental hospitals, and so this one young woman I met had been a patient as a child in a mental hospital, and they did these kinds of things to her with electric shock and psychedelics, and so that was one. The other one was the daughter of a CIA agent, and one of the things that happened is I was trafficked as a child. That was an aspect of it. I don't think that was necessarily orchestrated by the CIA hierarchy. But when you bring in these kind of people from say Nazi Germany and other places, some of them have ulterior motives. But she was exposed to that as well. Oddly, and then I met another woman who her memories aren't quite as strong, but she said enough to convince me that she was in it. I did meet and spent a good bit of time talking to an individual whose father was in the program and was basically, you know, they basically gave him daily doses of electric shock, psychedelic drugs, and isolation for months. So it basically ruined his life. And this individual actually successfully sued the CIA for that. This happened in Canada. It's the in Montreal, and the Allen Institute. And so, yeah, others I've met who say they're in it. I'm not, maybe they were, but it's a different time. This was shut down in '64, but they did have another program that was kind of similar that started up after that, and then that all was shut down in '73 when it got exposed. And but you know, I occasionally hear some people talk about. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying that whatever it is, it was not the same kind of program I was involved with.
Yeah, and I have no doubts that they have some programs buried deep in the labyrinth to this day on a lot of these things. Yeah, I guarantee you they do, and also other countries certainly because you mentioned the early kind of race between the USSR and the USA on a lot of the post-war assets from Germany as far as
Right.
their intellectual folks and scientists and yeah, that's yeah. Paperclip. Operation Paperclip always fascinated me. Yeah, how that kind of took place, and in a form of it took place over with the Russians too.
Yeah,
But
they were on the
but
right.
now, yeah. But as far as the healing journey, and as far as some of the healing techniques in this first novel that you spotlighted, would you care to share just a little insider preview into the healing techniques that are uh,
Sure.
in this one?
Sure. And one thing I might clarify here is that I did make a decision when I started writing the novel is that the three siblings, that as far as their their professional life and their personal life would not necessarily be the same of my siblings and myself. For example, the protagonist, that is sort of based on me, pursues a political career. I never did that. But as far as, being in the MK Ultra program as a child, as far as having those memories replaced, and then as far as those memories suddenly surfacing, then obviously I drew, on our experience for that because it's very unique. And um, it, the so we basically, I mentioned that my brother had a psychotic breakdown. He got put into a mental hospital, um, and they really couldn't help him much. They started giving him lots of drugs. At that time, I had no knowledge of this background. Although I will say, this was fascinating. His psychiatrist called me in to his office, and he said, "I don't. I want to tell you this, but I'm convinced your brother was subjected to electric shock as a young kid."
Oh, wow.
and,
Yeah.
and
You were like, what? Yeah.
yeah, I said, "Well," he said, "So do you know anything about that?" And I said, "No, I don't know." But anytime those kinds of things came up, I would always feel this spinning in my head. So when I actually watched The Manchurian Candidate, the 1960s version, for the first time at night, it just absolutely freaked me out. I mean, my head started spinning. I couldn't sleep that night. And I asked myself, did that happen to me? Because, I loved horror stories and, stuff like that. And why this movie would just completely unnerve me. So, those were, in retrospect, there was a lot of telltale signs. So a lot of the bizarre comments that my brother made set me off in the same way. And, um, but, but then something, I actually, when he made these weird statements, and I won't go into details that's in the novel, that made me read a couple of things that he told me to read that I thought made no sense. A memory came back of being in this big, terrifying house where I was just terrified. Yet there was also an odd sense of wonder, and I'll get to the wonder part a little bit later. But I dismissed it. I said, okay, what I'm reading has nothing to do with that. I just dismissed it. Then we had to, my sister felt there was nothing quite things wrong with our childhood, so she got a therapist. And when I went to visit her, I visited with her therapist. We had an intensive session for an hour and a half, and literally that night, she had a vision that
Ah,
basically told her that we had repressed our young childhood and that we needed to remember. And she couldn't remember. She became terrified, and she says, "I can't do that. I'm too terrified." And the vision said, "Tell your brother, wake him up. I was visiting her, and he will remember." So she woke me up in the middle of the night, told me this. And I don't want to go into too many details, but I began to remember things. It just started
right.
coming into my mind right away. Not necessarily about MK Ultra, but that started the process. And then the next day, our first memory block, major one, collapsed. So then, we both ended up after a while seeking therapy. I moved my brother to live with me once I realized that this was probably behind, and he was very psychic. This gets into the, you know, they both my siblings displayed the kind of psychic abilities that the CIA was interested in, remote viewing, knowing what's in your mind, that kind of stuff. And although it was not something they could do at command, it just would sort of happen. Um, so I moved him down to where I lived in San Antonio to stay with me, and put him into this hospital. And then he and I began to meet with his therapist. And then I finally realized I need a therapist, so I connected with that guy as well. And so it's psychotherapy, talk therapy. My therapist was great, just what I needed. Happened to know something about what went on in Germany after the war, and knew a lot about what the Nazis were up to. And so they so and my brother was in those sessions too. And then eventually, the MK Ultra memories started to come out, and it was it was quite shocking. And I mentioned there's some, since Stephen, you brought up, the the paranormal stuff, the other dimension stuff.
Mhm.
But that's not a major thrust of my novel, but it's in it because it was part of the experience. And I think other dimensional would be a good way to describe what. And I don't know, my whole approach in writing this novel is not to tell readers what to believe, but to share experiences, and then they can reach their own conclusions as to what it means. Because I ultimately don't know exactly. I mean, it could have been created by the psychedelic drugs, could have been created by when you disassociate, when you're under severe trauma, there's a part of you that leaves your body. And, so we
Yes.
certainly would have disassociated back then. So and actually have in my novel, my therapist explaining all kinds of different possible explanations for it. So the readers can decide. Um, but the other really major part about the novel that I haven't discussed yet, and I was puzzled about this for years, but we began at some point when my sister came and we went through a 7-day intensive sessions with, my brothers and my therapist with my sister present. The last day, probably the most significant memory block occurred. And it's still hard to talk about, but we remember there was a protector there, this boy who came from a shamanic tribe in the desert of northern Mexico. And
Wow.
when and I was just very confused. What was he doing there? That was just really weird. So when I
Right.
read Stephen Kinsner's book, I was also there was this one guy that I remembered that was, I called him a child serial killer, and I was wondering what was a child serial killer doing there. Well, Kesner's book, that's where I learned that they took these Nazis, and that fit with his. I mean, the guy remembered, yeah, he could have very well been an SS officer at one of the concentration camps that slaughtered people without compunction, because that's exactly what he was. But then he said that the CIA had this fascination in Mexican shamans. And so they sent an agent down there with this individual who had gone to a quote sacred shamanic ceremony involving magic mushrooms that were basically going to connect them with infinity, the divine, all kinds of things. And and he brought that magic mushroom back, and MK Ultra created psilocybin from
Huh.
it.
Wow.
And um, so since they were giving kids these kind of drugs, LSD, psilocybin, that's in Kinzer's book too. They would give them to kids, along with adults and college kids, and I'll tell you about the college kids in a minute. But they they probably would have had an interest in a kid that was raised to be a shaman who was exposed to these kinds of things. So that's my guess as to why he was there. But he had some shamanic skills, and basically my therapist, and he actually did his best to protect us. And so my therapist concluded that we likely survived more intact from our psyche standpoint because he was there than we would have if he hadn't been there.
Right.
Uh,
Right. He was
so
Mhm.
like a, yeah, like your guardian angel, so to speak.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Because he.
exactly, exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And I can, so I won't get into it, but it
Yeah.
was an, I don't want to give everything away, but
Right.
I went through the most radical transformation of my life when I remembered him.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's fascinating because yeah, I've definitely done some deep dives and things like ayahuasca and
Hmm.
and things like you're talking about the psychedelic mushrooms and the use of them by shamans and I love
Yes,
the and I love the Four Corners region. Anything that's
yes,
dealing with the ancestral Puebloans and I guess more popularly known as the Anasazi. It's not a I know it's not a term they embrace themselves, but that's well,
yeah. Steve,
that
Steve
whole
uses. As I say,
yeah
you use that
yeah
in a lot of your writing.
yeah,
So
I
yeah,
have,
he's done
but
deep
yeah,
dives.
I find that very fascinating. Yeah, especially yeah, with your talking about guardian type of role by this particular shaman and yeah, that's there's a lot to that.
Oh
So
yeah, a whole
yeah,
lot. And actually, the
yeah,
second novel, he's in the first novel, but he's going to be prominent, much more prominent in the next novel. He's just in the things that the state of consciousness that he put us into. Uh,
Wow.
that 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 was just, and luckily my therapist was into mysticism and all that stuff, knows
So
about
that
all that,
helps.
and
Right.
and,
hmm
and
Helps.
immediately
Yeah, because a lot
recognized.
of them don't want to discuss that or
touch it.
delve
Yeah, they
into
don't want
that.
to touch it. Yeah, right.
Right.
And it's very much a part of us. We are a spirit inside of a meat sack, and so our spirit and our consciousness are one. So yeah, it definitely helps when you got a therapist that is open minded
Yes.
and versed on mysticism and can help guide
hmm
you through these processes. Now, did you have you undergone hypnosis? Do you do hypnosis to
Yes.
try to bring out some of those suppressed memories?
Yes. Yes. Very definitely. When I That comes up in the next novel because this one ended in the late '80s. But yeah, when I got in, I moved to California. A lot of this took place in Texas, first in Maryland, then in Texas, where we grew up after age 11. Where I grew up, I lived in Maryland to age 11, and then I moved to California because of my job, and I got a another great therapist there who she basically she calls it psycho spiritual therapy. So very much, Holly, very much connected to everything you're talking about, and hypnotherapy, Reiki, EFT, emotional freedom technique, sometimes called tapping.
Tapping.
hmm
Yeah, uh, and those tools were enormously beneficial. I had pretty much recalled many of my memories when I met with her, but I had not dealt with the emotional baggage that goes with it. And it was those kind of therapies that really helped there. And I'm still dealing with it. I'm seeing a somatic therapist because I think some of the trauma is still in my body. So we're working on that now. But
Oh, definitely.
it's that's kind of the last vestige. It's the place that it's deepest in. And um, so the other thing, Holly and Stephen, you might be interested in, and you may already know this, but most people are quite shocked when they hear it. They owned MK Ultra, or the CIA owned all of the LSD virtually in the country back in the late '50s,
Yes.
hmm
and
hmm
so they just, so you probably know this, they distributed it to the college campuses.
hmm
Yeah.
And so Stephen Kinzner, and also the book The Search for the Manchurian Candidate by John Marks, a very good, that's the book that basically blew the lid on MK Ultra. I mean, the Senate committee and the presidential commissions definitely got into it, but he interviewed the people that were involved, and he used the Freedom of Information Act to get all of the remaining documents. And basically both of those authors, and they're very well reviewed uh, by the mainstream media, and they say they significantly created the '60s drug revolution and the counterculture movement.
And
hmm
hence why, and I still and it's curious that it became illegal, right? Because they know what it is capable of, and they know what it can do, and it can be dangerous without guidance. But it's the fact that they know that that this can open people up
Right.
to things. That's why it even amazes me that ayahuasca that they're still able to do this with ayahuasca. I don't know how long it's going to last. I
Well,
mean,
actually,
they'll
the
probably end up making it illegal.
the Supreme Court actually made a decision written by John Roberts of all people that basically anything used in a sacred ceremony, like ayahuasca, you can't have it.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Aha.
So, and the Veterans Administration, so back then, what happened? They didn't like. Needless to say, the CIA wasn't happy with the counterculture movement, and so they began. And the biggest thing though was when Mark's book came out, um, and exposed what they were doing to a greater degree than even their own, the government investigations. That shut the door down on all of those drugs. Um, they actually passed legislation on human uh, experiments on human subjects because they realized that the abuse
Mm-hmm.
was off the page. So, but they are now. I think you may know they are now. I mean, the veterans. I have a friend of mine who has gotten to use certain types of psychedelics in his treatment that the Veterans Administration is paying for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I followed
Right.
that. Yeah, the low dose psychedelics for therapeutic reasons.
Yes.
That's something that's actually been highly advocated. I've seen a lot of
Right.
stuff about that.
Um,
Yep.
so it's but yeah, well, you obviously have a good insight to a lot of this stuff, which is great, to talk about it because uh, a lot of people don't. And
Right. Right. We are familiar, yeah, with
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
this, but
definitely.
um,
But
another question I have before we go into your writing process is, where was your parents' involvement? All I mean,
yeah,
when did you talk to your parents about this? Did you do it as a group? Did you and your siblings do this together, or did you do it one by one? I mean, I I don't even know how this conversation would have went. I can't even imagine uh, how this
yeah,
conversation would go. But did you? I mean, were they both still living? Did you get to discuss this with them?
yeah. I mean, I did confront both my parents while they were still living. I did it personally. Certainly talked a lot. Well, actually, in truth, my brother was the first one to break. Actually, told my mother about it, and she completely freaked out because my sister and I, and it actually wasn't an MK Ultra thing; it was something else. But she said that never happened. She screamed at me, but to her enormous credit, this was this thing that happened that she was involved with. 4 years later, she confessed that it was true. She hadn't remembered herself, but it came back to her, and she wanted to let me know that I'd forgotten that. But yeah, and I said describe it in detail, and she did, and it was exactly what my sister and my brother and I recalled to the T. So that gave me a lot of confidence about repressed memories. Um, um, but as far as MK Ultra is concerned, uh, because of my brother's condition, I mean, he knew I was going to talk to my father, but my sister and I really talked about it a lot. But my sister lived away, so my wife brought my mother and everybody. My parents were visiting us uh, in San Antonio, and my mother brought my wife brought my mother out, so it would just be my father in the house. And so that's when I brought it up to him. And at the time, I didn't realize it was MK Ultra. We remembered all this stuff, but I had not yet heard the term MK Ultra and connecting it with this program. I had watched, conspiracy theory, but I didn't connect it with our experience because it was a very different kind of thing. And what was so weird is he kept looking over his shoulders as if somebody was standing behind him and whispering to me,
mhm.
so the people behind him couldn't hear. Well, he knew nobody was in the house, but and I could be wrong on this, and I don't want to play armchairs. But what occurred to me is he doesn't want his primary personality to hear this.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
That's what it felt like, you know,
Right.
that he didn't. And I mean, his first comment was very bizarre. He said, "Well, that sounds like the kind of program your mother would have put you into when I was in the Korean War."
Huh.
And I said,
Wow.
"Well, I wasn't born when you were in the Korean War. This happened when you were there, summer of '58." And
Hmm.
he, and that's when he went into this dual personality. Um, I think they were monkeyed with. You know, we were just there for the summer of 1958, May, June, and July. I don't think we were there in August. Um, I mean, and, and I I went through all of the family pictures. I knew my mother constantly took pictures of us when we were that young, and they were and the whoever developed the picture, you know, I think she brought it to a drugstore. They had the dates, the month, and the year,
Right,
and
right.
and so I said, okay, I'm gonna, you know, we think my sister thinks that this occurred in the summer of '58 because she was a very outgoing, good student in the spring of '58, and then she was just a recluse and a bad student in the fall of '58. So she was thinking, and she couldn't remember that summer. She knew her whole life that she couldn't remember that summer, and uh, and I couldn't remember moving into that house we were in, which also happened that summer. And so um, there were a bunch of pictures: January, February, March, April, none from May, June, and July. Not a one.
Hmm.
And then a bunch of them after that. So I
Wow.
mean, it it
Yeah.
it was you know I try to use detective work, and some of the stuff isn't in this novel, but it'll be in this
And
second
then
novel. Yeah, and the next. But so you know, I they were very normal parents for me for the rest of my life, and that's why
Hmm.
it was such a shock when this stuff came out. I mean,
I'd
I
imagine.
I thought I had an idyllic childhood, and for much of it, it was. But you know, it. But my mother, you know, she grew up in Nazi Germany. She was in Dresden during the bombing
Wow.
in the railroad
Mm,
station.
Yeah, the firebombing there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I got anecdotes about those experiences in my novel. You know, that
Hmm.
tend to my grandmother meeting somebody she did not want to meet at all, but she ended up meeting him, Adolf Hitler, and
Wow.
so she went through a lot of rough stuff. And my father was, of course, in two wars, so you know I think they were. But if you look at pictures of them in the late '50s, and then look at pictures of them the way they looked after that, it's they very
Hmm.
different, completely different. A cousin of mine came across pictures of my father from that period. He goes, "God, your father looks like
Feedback is ready.
really
Hmm.
weird, really weird." And
Hmm.
Yep, that is. That is.
Do you think?
Which Nazi Germany, the Nazis were very involved in the similar experiments. You know,
Oh
they
yeah,
even
anything.
took things
Cult.
much further. Yes,
Yeah,
especially with
occult,
the
everything.
occultism.
Hmm.
Yes, yes.
But
yeah,
do you think the mind, being that this is in mind control and so forth, do you believe that your parents may actually have had these techniques used on them, or do you think they, in retrospect, do you think it more likely that they allowed the program to have you and your siblings used in this manner, or do you think they themselves were also had this done to them? I
I'm
mean,
not
that's
100% certain, but I think it's very possible given the split. You know, I mean, split personalities can come up for other
yeah.
reasons, of course. So,
Right.
but they were focused on that. What I would say is I don't know that it worked all that well. I mean, because
Hmm.
in this particular case, the minute I brought it out, he started spilling the beans. So,
Right.
um,
Right. Well,
it
my thing is, what was the driving force? What was the initiative for why would they have done this if they would have known exactly what was going to go on? You know what I mean?
right,
With
right,
with everything that was going to, be done to you, why
right,
in the world would they have done? So I feel like that not everything was divulged to them to begin with,
right,
probably, And was there money involved? Was there, why is my
Yeah,
question.
yeah. They may have
Yeah.
gotten some money, but my novel leans toward they were manipulated.
Yeah,
Hmm.
You
that
know,
That's what I
makes
was wondering.
sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
because why else?
Yeah.
My father was very gullible. He was very trusting of the government.
Hmm.
Ah,
And I think they could have said this is good. Well, we do remember my mother saying this: if you go into this program, you're going to become extraordinary individuals. But
Hmm.
they were never there, so I don't think they knew anything of what was going on.
right.
Uh, um, and I'm sure other parents were manipulated like that too.
Yeah,
They
they
were
thought you were going to be like some kind of X-Men per se, that it was going to open up and you were going to
Talents. Yeah.
be, you were going to have skills and talents that others didn't possess.
right. They were trying to do that. Very, very, very well said. Particularly, I think with my brother and my sister. With me, one of the Nazis had a separate objective that I don't think the CIA had anything to do with. He wanted, it's in my novel and some of my literature talk about, he programmed me to become president, to free
Uh-huh.
Eastern Europe and East Germany.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yep.
So that's I don't know if 100% that's true, but I could see why they might want to do something like that. These Nazis that are all over the United States, they didn't think that Eisenhower and American government was capable of standing up to the communists, so their homeland was in the possessions of the Soviets. They
Hmm.
wanted to get it back. So
Hmm.
um, you know, so there's some things in the novel that are speculative, but possibly true.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. So would you consider it, I mean, what genre would you consider this? It's not nonfiction. Alternate history, or what are you
Not so much
considering it?
ultimate. I call it a coming of age because it really covers these kids throughout their childhood into their adulthood. So I call it a coming of
Okay.
age psychological thriller
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
with elements of historical fiction and metaphysical.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a
Did
good
you have a
cross
writing
genre.
background before getting into this, or did you have like a writer friend guide, giving you some guidance?
Yeah. Well, you wanted me to get
How
into
how
my.
did you do this?
Sure. Well, thank you. That's a good question. Yeah, because you were
Mhm.
wanting me to talk about my writing process. So that's a
Yes.
great segue into that. Well, actually, I was into writing before this. I mean, oddly enough, when my brother went psychotic, it was devastating to me. I was very close to him. And when there's somebody that you know and have been around more than anybody, and then they become a different person, it is terrible. And
Yeah.
um, I had to retreat into something. So I decided I was going to write. And that kind of filled my mind. And I was into horror stories, um, and some of which foreshadow,
Yeah.
actually.
Well,
And
Hmm.
so, yeah, I did. And at work, I had to do a lot of writing, I mean, professional business writing. But I always noticed that if my professional business writing improved, my creative writing improved, and vice versa. So I got a lot of practice writing at work. So, but really, my my approach to writing was getting lots of feedback. I've had several professional editors that I paid, two of them to go through the book. I had a focus group that I paid that had 11 different readers who read an average of 50 novels a year, uh, and go through it and critique it. And I got a 60-page report back, and they rated it. They rated everything. And what was gratifying about that, they did point out some things to fix, but all 11 liked it. I mean, nine extremely much or a lot, and then two on average. And she
Hmm.
told me, you don't get that. So I think that's partly because it's got so many different aspects to it. So different people like different things, and this one's kind of got that. So and then I had over 50, I mean over 100 beta readers just read it to
nice.
get feedback. So I'm not saying you can't write a novel that absolutely everybody likes, but yeah, I do think some people get triggered by it and they got to stop reading it. People who have had bad experiences, and I tell them by all means, stop reading it
Hmm.
if it triggers you. Uh, a lot of people just read it like a beach thriller. That's
Hmm.
but some of the people that know me, to them, they know me, so they get they hate to see this stuff happen. So I think women who like book clubs, who like psychological, character-driven novels, is one audience for it. I did have a 16-member book club read it, and they said it was the longest book club discussion they ever had, 3 hours.
I'd
And
Nice.
imagine. Yeah, because there's so many ways you can approach this, so many different angles,
Hmm.
and yeah, things you could discuss and segues into other topics. I mean, yeah, it's endless, where you can go with this. But yeah, I'm very excited to read it um,
thank
when
you.
it does come out next week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
it's
actually, you
fascinating.
can buy it now. It's
Okay,
but the Amazon site is not fully built out yet, but you can
okay,
actually order it. Um, um, but a couple of minor changes are being made to the version that's coming out. When I have the big marketing push, uh,
right.
a couple of things they did, little mistakes that I want them to correct. But I mean, they're not major, but they're there. And the yeah, so it's. Uh, but I really enjoyed you all's perspective. Uh, you knew where to go.
No, no, it's a fascinating topic, and definitely, yeah. Speaking with someone that's got personal experience with it, yeah, it's a real privilege for us. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's been fascinating.
It has.
And,
And I
yeah,
do want to you wanted to touch on one topic is and we love Stranger Things. The Netflix show Stranger Things,
Yeah,
and most of our tribe, our listeners, our circle, they love it too. It's a masterpiece. We're just eagerly awaiting the next season.
yeah,
But
whenever it gets there.
yeah, but
yeah,
you wanted to talk about how the references, point out the references to the MK Ultra and the similarities that
yeah,
are
yeah.
parallel to Stranger Things
Yeah,
in
some
Stranger
some
Things.
some similarities. I mean, the interesting thing about that is, I would tell people about MK Ultra, and my younger and like our kids and friends, and when that TV show came out on Netflix, I just started getting emails. Oh, you got to watch Stranger Things. It's about MK Ultra, and of course MK Ultra, the program of MK Ultra I was in took place in the 1950s. Although, have you heard about
Right.
the uh, the play in London that started there and is going to come to the United States? That's they call it the origin story. That takes place in the late 50s.
Hmm.
So um, uh, and so they have the Department of Energy doing it. But they gave us numbers like in that movie, and they were into psychic stuff like in that movie. And I mentioned the interdimensional stuff that I
Hmm.
either
Right.
that, of course, I will say that don't expect monsters, and
Yeah.
all that
Right.
stuff.
Mind players and
But they
yeah.
Mind
capture
players.
they
Yeah.
yeah, but they capture the the atmosphere, the terror of that. And so I think I'm glad that came out. I mean, from what I can tell, Generation Z is pretty big into MK Ultra, and I suspect it's because of that show.
Hmm. Oh
Yes,
yeah.
I think it's a renewed interest. Plus the fact they're into being more open minded
Right,
and looking at things from outside the box,
right, yeah, yes,
because they've seen it over I mean, there's enough proof now that these things did happen, that parallel
Hmm.
universes are more than probable and different
right,
dimensions. So it's a very curious topic for them. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that in the next 10, 20 years
yeah,
as they dive deeper into that world.
Hmm.
yes, yes. No, very definitely. One of the theme that I say is this part of my book motion is reality may not be what you think it is.
Hmm.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
Uh,
I seen a very curious article today, and I need to send it to you, Bill. I'll send it to
okay.
you when the show's over. Um, I sent it to Stephen earlier, and it was the fact that they have, I forget where this was, Steve. I don't know if you remember, but anyway, they have taken brain cells and in a petri dish, and they have grown brain cells, and they can put these brain cells, it creates like a consciousness, right? And plug it
Well,
into like a program, and these brains that they've developed and in a lab are learning at a faster rate than the actual AI is learning. And they're looking at making like cyborg little creatures. They're putting in like little robotic creatures and everything, and punching in simulations. Like
wow.
there's this whole butterfly simulation where they believe they're butterflies, and that's, they adapt and act like butterflies and do all these things because that's what they believe they are, because
Wow.
that's what's punched in. So then they're like, it raises questions. Are we living in a simulation? Who
Yeah.
knows? But I mean,
Yeah.
it's very curious. So I'm going to send you this article. It's you
Yeah.
would be interested in it. You would.
Yeah.
Oh, it
Yeah. We'll
sounds
have to
fascinating.
send that.
Thank you. Yeah, that I hadn't heard of that angle. The petri dish, and this is organic
Yeah.
live matter as opposed
Yes.
to yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Biological.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a
It's
mixing.
wild.
We're looking into cyborg territory here, which that is frightening in a
Yeah.
whole
Mm.
other
Yeah.
on a whole other level.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's yeah. I hopefully one of the things that the publisher asked me to write articles about is what are the lessons of MK Ultra when it comes to advanced science, AI, and that
Right.
stuff.
Hmm.
So that's a very that's a lesson that can be learned from MK Ultra. You venture down these paths, you might get something very different than you really want.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean that, and on to
Well,
the chimera experiments now, where they're taking things from animals and combining it with human DNA, and
Ooh,
yeah,
mhm.
that's happening.
right.
That's definitely happening now, and a lot of wild stuff. Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely a lot ethical questions and lessons. Yeah,
Yes.
that they're gonna be pretty
Well,
severe. I think.
I know we've gone a little over, but because we could just keep going for hours
Oh
on
yeah,
this.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
This is
could,
fascinating.
yeah.
we
But
could.
I do have to ask this of you, Bill. Why I've got you on here? I have a great fascination, and Steve, he never understands it, but it's my critical brain. I was a nurse for over 27 years,
Oh,
and I have a very wide fascination with the psychology of serial killers. um why, what stem where does it stem from, the different traumas they experience as children opposed to their adulthood, how that affects, or when does this start to develop, and this, just the whole aspect of it. But there was a rise in the 70s, and that was like the birth of a whole other breed of serial killers. There was so many of them that come to light, and I know now it's harder to get by with, obviously, because of our, um, you know,
Forensics
the
and
the
all that.
the forensic science has advanced so much that it's harder for them to get by. But there's still a few out there, and they're very sly and tricky, and usually, geniuses with the IQs.
right, right.
But my question is, do you think there is a tie-in? Because there's all kinds of theories out there leading from, they think that it was lead paint could have caused, the trigger for the rise of the serial killers of the 70s. I've heard that one. There's just a whole many different areas you can go through. But do you think it could have stemmed from some of these mind control experiments?
Well, actually, there's been some speculation out there. I don't know if you've heard of the book Chaos.
No.
I can't recall the author, but he was on the Rogan show, and I watched him being interviewed, and I read it actually. My son's fiance gave me the book, and
Ooh.
his premise is that Charles Manson was in something like MK Ultra,
Hmm.
I
and
would I would totally believe that.
Yeah, I
and
could see that.
he
Yeah.
couldn't prove it conclusively. He gave a lot of pretty convincing circumstantial evidence, but and he was very forthright and honest. That it's not cut and dry, but it certainly raises suspicion. I mean, there's people who have talked about the Unabomber, having been in the Harvard MK Ultra program. Some
Right.
people
Right.
dispute that, but that seems to be what others believe, and um, so that's I never heard about what you just said about the 1970s. I can tell you that having been subjected to this stuff, I guess this is what I like to say about myself. If I had not been supported by that boy from Mexico, he was 14 years old. I'm sort of scared of what I would have become.
Right.
Hmm.
Because you just don't know.
You
Yeah.
just don't know. But it gave that kind of trauma. I One of the things that I know I've become on my healing journey is I have a lot more empathy, and it wasn't like I had none, but I I was emotionally shut down. I didn't know what certain words meant that had to do with emotion, and
Right.
when somebody doesn't have an emotional compass, then now I never thought of hurting anybody. I mean, I was never like that, but when I heard about things, I couldn't quite understand. Yeah, I just didn't get sad. And my sister was
Right.
the
It
same
was like
way.
being autistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember after we remembered the Indian boy, I mean, literally overnight, um, my sister and I compared notes, and it was like, oh God, there was this earthquake in San Francisco, and I was feeling so much compassion, and I've never felt that before, and I was too. So yeah, there could be something to that, and it's particularly striking about the timeline, that you described. But
Right.
again, yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
for sure, but it's worth looking into. It's good that they got so many better techniques to catch these people.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes, it is.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. But there's still a lot of them that well, they still crop up every now and then.
That's
They
right.
still get left. But yeah, it's fascinating because it's what stemmed this behavior, what started this, or I mean, we get mad at people, but we don't go out and mass murder.
Right.
There's something internally in us that prevents us from even wanting to do that. So, on a human level. So yeah, it makes you wonder what was the trigger? What are those triggers? And it is curious that you think, well, maybe they are mind controlled. Maybe
Or,
they were
Some
hypnotized.
level.
Maybe yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So,
And the
so many
Manson
people.
the
Go ahead.
Manson theory would have some credence because you were mentioning earlier the CIA did not like the counterculture movement, and
right.
certainly the Manson family would cast a dark shadow over the
Communal,
counterculture. Yeah.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
So yeah, there would be a definite purpose, yeah,
Right.
in there if that theory is
well,
correct. Yeah.
and it's a good theory because Manson never murdered no one. He didn't murder anyone. He
Right.
was able to control the minds of others and brainwash them to
Right.
doing his bidding for him.
Right. Exactly. And that author really gets into that strongly. It's that he was a master at mind control.
Hmm.
Yes. Well, I'll
So,
definitely read that book.
yeah.
Thank you for
Chaos. Uh,
Yeah.
chaos. Okay.
And we're
Okay.
definitely going to be reading Memories of NK Ultra because
Thank
this
you.
sounds
Yes.
this sounds really good. It's totally up my alley, and I know it's up Holly's alley. So we're going to be checking this out and definitely
And
getting the new version that's going to be marketed. You said next week, and I'd love for you to share with our audience how to find you online and to connect with getting the book when it
sure,
comes
sure.
this
So
version comes out.
two things. One is, I'd like people to come to my website that are, particularly anybody that's skeptical of what I'm talking about that the CIA did, because on my website they literally can see dozens and dozens of New York Times, Washington Post, NPR, BBC
Mm-hmm.
articles on, so this is an historical fact. And then also just going, and so we will, when the book is ready to go out, uh, with a mass marketing campaign, we would certainly have on the website where you can get the book on Amazon. I mean, it's going to be on a lot of other platforms too. But the the and then obviously just going to Amazon and just typing in "memories of MK Ultra" and it comes up. But it's that site is just not finished out. Looks it doesn't have the cover. You can order it, but it's and it's just not finished. So
Right.
I appreciate you saying that and asking that. I think they'll find a lot of the stuff on the website, and there's a book trailer on the website.
And the
Cool.
URL address for the website is, just to go over
Um,
that again.
okay, let me go on. Well, I appreciate you asking that, and I don't have that memorized, but I'm going to go open it up real
Sure,
quick.
sure.
Go
On
ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
on
And
the
is there a way on there to like email you? People have questions or
sure,
would
there's a
like
contact
to,
page.
reach.
Yeah,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a contact page. Um,
Okay.
and one thing I want to do, I always like to set expectations. Um, a lot of the stuff, the other dimensional and of course, the MK Ultra stuff is there from the start. But
Right.
part of my objective is to show how all this stuff affects kids going to school, growing up, their interpersonal relationships. So it is sort of at the beginning very much a coming of age, why these kids so sort of twisted. And in the second half, it's just that's when the fireworks start
Mm-hmm.
happening. So I
The
don't want you
thriller
to
aspects.
think we're going to. I mean, actually, the interdimensional thing crops up pretty early, but it doesn't really go into detail. So I just want to. The women love that beginning. They just really eat that up, and a lot of men do too. But I think they get more into the second half of the
Mm-hmm.
novel.
Sounds very, very fascinating. And
It does.
yeah, I look forward to reading that.
One thing I did want to mention while I'm looking that up is that my wife and I are big into healing, so we're going to be opening up another website in the not too distant future, which really has all kinds of different healing techniques. A lot of these psycho
Mm-hmm.
spiritual ones that Holly you were talking about, and I know Steve you're familiar with those as well, and in articles you can read about them. And then my wife and I are particularly into EFT, so we're going to be offering those
Mm-hmm.
coaching sessions, and we're going to be putting out a book on that, a communal tapping, which kind of gets into that spiritual realm because when you're doing something like EFT and you do it at the same time with other people, the power is magnified.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely, yeah. When you have that book, definitely let us know, and definitely we'll have you back on the show to discuss that too. Because
Oh,
yeah,
thank
that'd be one. Yeah, definitely like to hear about for sure. But
okay. Here is the URL is it's HTTPS colon and then slash slash and then just
mm-hmm.
simply BillYarborough.com. And then that will bring you to the main page of the website. But I like people to go to the novel page. So it's slash after .com, it's slash novel slash.
Great.
Cool.
So BillYarborough.com will take you to the main page and
Yeah.
get you there.
And then,
Nice.
and then just go to the novel page that I think has the most. I mean, look at the rest too, but that's got the book
Sure.
trailer, that's got the New York Times. I mean, it's got all those articles, it's got the history, of and the books, those kind of things.
Yeah, that's great. And that's great that you have all those resources right there. Yeah, so it's not just
Yes.
saying go
And
do your research, but you have them, the links right there. That's
exactly,
fantastic.
exactly. It's got the
That's
links to the book,
fantastic.
and then you
And
can
then
use
and
that.
then it segues. It segues
Hmm.
into your healing. You was talking
Hmm.
about the EFTs and
Yes.
uh, the tapping
Reiki and
technique.
hmm
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
on that on the releases, and it says this is coming, and then you can put your name down if you want to be notified uh,
Cool.
when that
sure.
website opens up. Um, and podcasts are going to be put on here. Now, would I be able to put your podcast on, or what? How does that
Yes, you
work?
will. Yes, you will.
Yes.
We'll send you an embed. I'll send you the embed link and also the regular link. And so once it's posted for streaming download, yeah, you absolutely can. No
And
problem. No whatsoever.
tomorrow this it will be it records as we're taping right now the live, and it will be available on all the
Yeah,
major
all the platforms.
podcast
Mhm.
platforms: Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, all
Uh,
that.
YouTube,
Great.
all of them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And one about the morning after the live shows when we post that
yeah,
up. So
Great.
tomorrow, in other words, yeah. So
Well,
definitely it'll be going out, but I'll get you the links, and you can download the file if you'd like and post that. But we do have an
good.
embed link that makes it really easy for websites. So we'll
yes.
send you that as well. Don't worry.
Well, great. I mean, this has been wonderful. I've done one other podcast that was really good, but it didn't get into some of these more mystical type things. So
No
the
problem. We love it.
I love that stuff.
Well,
So
when the next one's coming out, getting ready to come out, you need to come back. You got to come
Yeah,
back and talk
yeah.
to us about.
Yes, you
Yes,
do.
the next one. I'm fast. You
oh,
know, I'm hooked.
oh yeah, that
Yeah,
Indian kid, he is. Well, you
yeah.
know what awakened means, right?
Was that?
Well, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, he was awakened at 14.
Nice,
Wow.
nice. Yeah.
Not when he arrived,
Nice.
but it happened while he was there. And
Wow.
yeah, luckily my therapist knew what that was.
Wow.
She figured that out real quick.
Well, you have the right therapist. I will say that,
You do.
and
Sounds like you
you were
absolutely do.
guided
Yeah.
by I believe strongly that the ancestors guide us, and I
Yeah,
believe that the ancestors guided you to, yeah, the right direction.
yeah. This Indian boy was very much guided by his ancestors, and that's in
Yes.
this book. Just how they brought him there. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
Nice.
okay, well, this has been a lot of fun.
Yes, it has, and yeah, thank you. It's been an honor, and yeah, if there's any final statement you'd like to make, please do. Otherwise, yeah, I'll turn it over to Holly to close out. But yeah, thank you, and definitely look forward to having you on in the
Been a great
future.
talk.
Yeah, appreciate
Okay,
you.
yeah, and well, the last thing I think is, you you can heal. In other words, uh, I've had some significant shortcomings in my life that I never thought. I mean, I had a stutter. When I got promoted at work, they said, "We're promoting you despite your stutter," and I couldn't speak really good before crowds. My boss said, you've basically, if you could speak as well as you write, you would be doing great." I did EFT and of course other things too, hypnotherapy for about a year. And a year later, he said, "You do presentations better than anybody on my team."
Nice.
So,
Nice.
I mean, different techniques work for different people, uh,
True.
but you can heal. It takes persistence. And I oftentimes, wasn't persistent, but so we can save that more for the next thing on the healing website. But that is a big important message I want to give. And even if you don't have traumas like this, your productivity at work, your relationships, uh, your artistic or sports interests, I think some of these things really have the capacity to help in those arenas. So you don't have to be, messed up like I was to benefit from them.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, thank
Well,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, thank
You.
you so much, Bill, for being such a great and fascinating guest. Yeah, but I will definitely be in touch.
Okay.
Uh,
Mhm.
Well,
I
well, thank you for being such a great host and asking really great questions that helped me get to the heart of matters that I probably would not have otherwise.
You're welcome.
great.
That's what we hope to
That's
do.
what we do. That's what we say. That's what we do.
That's what we hope to do. Yes.
But
And
yes,
but
I will send you that article, and we will be in touch. And yes, have a great night, Bill, and thank you so much. And I wish you the best on your continued
absolutely.
healing journey.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Really
Thank
appreciate
Take
you.
it. Okay.
take care.
Good
Bye
night.
bye. Have a good night.
You too.
And to all of our listeners out there and future listeners, please join us next Wednesday. Another great guest. Another great chat, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Podbean live. And join our chat room. And you can ask questions and call in and comment. And we'd love to hear from you. Good night, all. Be creative.